the majority of people have got the wrong view on negotiation. The majority of people think it's a bit of an arm wrestle. You know, it's a haggle. I'm not going to pay any more than £1,000 for that car. Well, I'm not going to sell it for less than 2,000. And they think that that is good negotiating because that's what they've seen on the films or whatever. But there is a much better way to negotiate.
Welcome to the Digital Rapport podcast, and on today's episode I have the amazing Simon Horton. Now Simon is a world-renowned negotiation expert who has worked with organizations like Goldman Sachs, the Qatar Sovereign Wealth Fund, the British Army. He's written 2 books on the topic, and his latest book titled The End of Conflict: How AI Will End the War and Help Us Get On Better is about some amazing impact that AI is having. And I'm so happy to have Simon on board with us. I've known Simon for years and got him out of his busy schedule to have a conversation about this topic. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you so much for having me here. Really looking forward to chatting. As you say, we go back a long way. Yeah, really nice to catch up with you.
Awesome, Simon. So Simon, before we get into the topic of, AI and rapport and things like that, first question I just generally ask is, what is rapport to you?
What is rapport to me? Rapport is that ease of getting on with somebody, just that ease of being in that presence of somebody, where, yeah, you enjoy being with them, you want to be with them. I did come across some research recently, actually, that kind of gives the neural substrate of rapport, actually. So I don't know whether you come across the experiment where they got people to have conversations, pairs of people to have conversations, and then those conversations were evaluated how successful they were, and by the people in the conversation. The only thing about the conversations was that they were held when they were in an MRI scan, and their brains were being scanned as they had the conversation. And what the experimenters looked for was any correlation between the brain scans and those conversations deemed to be successful conversations. And there was a correlation. And the correlation was the more the brain scans looked the same, the more the same parts of the brain were firing at the same time on a dynamic basis as the conversation progressed, the more likely it was going to be considered a successful conversation by the 2 people in the conversation. So that's the neural substrate of rapport, where basically our brains are firing in sync, basically.
In sync. Oh, wow. That's like that concept of, I think it's mirror neurons or something, isn't it?
Where it's very related to mirror neurons. And mirror neurons is part of that. One of the ways in which our brains get in sync is through the mirror neurons. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. And we're touching on all this rapport stuff more in detail as well. But firstly, I just wanted to, just so the listeners can get a bit of background as well, is like, how did you get into this whole space of negotiations?
Yeah. It's a really good question, because my first career was technical. I used to work in IT. I used to work in the finance sector and design derivatives trading systems and things like this. And I did that for about 12 years, and I was good at it, but I hated every moment of it, kind of thing. I kind of went from one mental health crisis to another. And then I decided I needed to get out of it. I got into psychology. And I really loved psychology, and we're going back 25 years now, and I really wanted to build a career, my business in psychology, applied psychology, but the business world typically doesn't buy psychology per se, but it does buy its applications, the applications of psychology. And negotiation was the most obvious bottom line application of psychology, because when you're negotiating with a human being. And so if you understand their psychology, if you know how they make their decisions, you can negotiate better with them because you can put your outcome in terms of how they make their decisions. And so basically that's why I chose that as a route, and that's what I've been doing for the last 15 or 20 years.
Right. So, and when would you say it was like, were you inspired? Like, I think about negotiation and I see some movies on it and things, you see those kind of things going on. Were any of those kind of things that influential in inspiring you to do a bit more in
Well,
negotiation?
yeah, I think there is, interestingly, and I didn't realize it at the time, and it's actually much deeper than a film kind of thing. It's what it was is that so I grew up in the 1970s, and my mum was Irish Catholic, and my dad was English Protestant. And the 1970s was the time of the Northern Ireland Civil War, the Troubles kind of thing. And we didn't live in Northern Ireland, but still it was on the news every day. And every time that it was on the news, my mum and dad would argue about it. My dad would blame my mum would blame my dad. And even as a 10-year-old, as a 9-year-old, I remember thinking, there's a better way. There's a better way of conducting this conversation. There's a better way of solving the Northern Ireland problem as other than bombs kind of thing. There's a much better way, surely. And that wasn't part of my conscious thinking decision process, but in retrospect, I'm pretty sure it was that experience that led to me teaching negotiation skills, teaching win-win collaboration and conflict resolution. Yeah.
So that's potentially like the basis of when your whole kind of understanding and rapport building and all that kind of stuff came into play, right?
From your childhood experiences. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. And tell me a bit more about some of the experience that you can share with like, the big massive companies that you worked with. Like what are the common kind of things that you're dealing with there or teaching, or what kind of stuff happens there?
Yeah, so I work with all kinds of people, as you say, as you mentioned, kind of a lot of finance sector, a lot of law firms. Lawyers know they negotiate on a daily basis, and so they train, and it can be kind of set piece kind of negotiations. For example, with lawyers over contracts or whatever, purchasing or selling kind of negotiations or joint venture negotiations, but it can be internal negotiations too. And because I believe that an organization conducts a million micro negotiations every day. And that's what the organization is built on. Those tiny collaborations between this team and that team, the operations team and the finance team, for example, or the compliance team and the sales team. There are all kinds of micro negotiations taking place every day. And I think that if an organization can conduct those micro negotiations to reach win-win outcomes rapidly and smoothly, that's going to be a really high-performing organization. And so I teach a lot of the kind of the internal collaboration kind of negotiations as well. And what I find is, interestingly, the majority of people have got the wrong view on negotiation. The majority of people think it's a bit of an arm wrestle. It's a haggle. I'm not going to pay any more than £1,000 for that car. Well, I'm not going to sell it for less than 2,000. And they think that that is good negotiating because that's what they've seen on the films or whatever. But there is a much better way to negotiate that is much more effective, creates more value, is genuinely win-win. And I understand that people often push back, Simon, in my situation, it's zero sum, so it can't be win-win. I think if we go about it the right way, even in those situations that seem to be zero sum, there is win-win to be had. People often also push back that they say, yes, Simon, I'm win-win, I'm collaborative, but the other person isn't. Of course, it's always the other person. But to be fair, that can be true, but I teach them methods how to make the other person more collaborative as well, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's like that, hence why like you brought up the subject of films because as soon as you talk to someone about negotiation, that's what pops up is
Yeah,
exactly what you said. So they got this wrong angle on it to
exactly.
some degree. And negotiation is such a powerful tool, like you said, in business, in relationships, pretty much everything that you're doing. For like just generally, like I know this is a massive topic and people can, reach out to you for more details on it as well. But in a general kind of way, if you have, let's just say two scenarios, just because that's your general kind of one, you got like a relationship type of pathway, and the other one might be a business scenario.
Yeah.
Is the art of negotiation the same in both of them? Is there like a set of steps or routines that you could do that works across both of them? Would you mind sharing a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. I think you're right. I think, firstly, I think you're right in that we're negotiating all the time. As you say, sure, we're negotiating at work, but we're negotiating with our partner about what film we're going to watch or where we're going to go on holiday kind of thing, or who's going to take the rubbish out. And our world is built on those negotiations. And so again, my mantra is sometimes get good at negotiation, get good at life kind of thing. Because again, if you bring a win-win negotiation approach to those negotiations, that's going to make your life so much better. And often, sometimes because people view negotiation as the haggle, as the arm wrestle, they think that the relationship to get your outcome, the relationship will suffer. But this isn't true. If you go about it the right way, you can get your outcome, and the other person can get their outcome, and the relationship will improve. And so I really think that and so then going to your question, is it the same structures, kind of as in a multi-billion-dollar acquisition or some business acquisition or something? Yes, it is. Pretty much it's an identical structure. And I do think that there are contextual
Mm,
overlays. So sure, if in a merger or acquisition or in a legal negotiation, a contract negotiation or something, each of those situations, they're each going to have their own specifics due to the context.
yes.
But by and large, it's the same core principles. And if you get those core principles, you can bring them everywhere you go. Yeah.
Mhm. There's a few that you could share with us, like just so people could take away and start to, utilize it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So it's interesting because you mentioned I've written a few books, and the latest one. What I did is rather than repeat myself in the book, I summarized the previous book in one chapter, and summarized all that I'd written in the previous books in one chapter, and I called it the golden formula, the negotiation golden formula. And basically, the golden formula is that your outcome equals, I've called it IVB cubed. IVB cubed, right? Okay, so that's the golden formula. So what does that stand for? I stands for your interests. And that's a kind of a technical term in negotiation context, but it basically means your bigger picture goals. Focus on the bigger picture. So it's not, I can't pay more than £1,000 for this car. Well, I'm not going to sell it for less than 2,000. And we get fixated on the £1,000 or £2,000. We get fixated on the pennies. And it's very difficult to get a win-win solution if we approach it that way. Instead, if we focus on the bigger picture, why do you want to buy the car in the first place? Why do you want to sell the car in the first place? And when we look at the reasons behind that,
Mhm.
and explore those, invariably there is a solution that really genuinely does reach both parties' goals at that bigger picture level. And so it's about exploring that, and that just creates a bigger solution space.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's easier to find the right solution.
Hmm.
That's the interests. Second one is the V is the variables, and identify as many variables as you can. And so 9 times out of 10, negotiations are about one variable only, and that's money, that's price. And if the negotiation is only about one variable, you can't get win-win. It's impossible because any penny you get is at my expense. So I'm going to fight it. Any penny I get is at your expense. So you're going to fight it. So with just one variable, we've set it up as a fight. So in order to get a genuine win-win, we need to identify multiple variables, and then we can get the win-win across the package of variables. So give an example. Let's say client asks you to do some work, and then you give a quote, and let's say you say it's going to cost 10,000, and they go, "Oh, that's too much." And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Clients will say this, whether that's true or not, kind of thing. But let's say it is true. Let's say they don't have the budget for £10,000. Well, if it's just that price, then there's no solution other than you giving in and saying, okay, I'll do it for 8,000 or something. But if you can look at more variables like the scope or the quality of the job or the level of the level of seniority of the staff person doing the job, or the payment terms or the timing of it. Maybe right now I'm super busy. If you want me to do it now, I'll do it. I'll have to charge full price. But in July and August, I'm always a bit quiet. So I'd be very happy to do it then at a lower price. So we bring in all these different variables. And it might be performance-related pay, it might be bonus tiered, or phase one is this price, phase two is this price, etc. So we bring in a lot more variables into the equation. And now, always with respect to the interests, the bigger picture goals, we play around with those variables to find something that really does suit your interests and really does suit my interests. So that's the first two, the I, the V, interest and variables. The third one is your BATNER, and your BATNER is a technical term, and
BATNER.
many negotiators know the word BATNER. Most people don't, but it stands for your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And basically what it is, it's your plan B. If you're buying a house and you're only focusing on one house, then you're probably not going to get a good price. If there's only this, you're only after this one house. I can't tell you how many people have asked me for advice on negotiating on a house, and they said the other side won't budge. And I said, okay, tell me about your alternative houses. What else are you looking at? And they'll say, oh, no, I'm not looking at any other ones, just this one. And I go, just this one? Yeah. What, this is the only house you want to live in? Yeah. What, the only house in the whole of the country? Yeah. The only house in the whole of the world? Yeah. And so, okay, well, in that case, fine. You're going to have a lot of difficulty getting them to bring the price down because they know you want that. So you're going to have to pay full price. But as soon as you've seen other ones and you like this other one over here and you like this other one over here, right, now you are in a much better negotiating position. So that's your BATNER, the second house and the third house that you're looking at, kind of thing. And so always make sure you've got a good BATNER, a good fallback plan that you're comfortable with, that you're happy with. So that's the IVB, and I say it's IVB cubed. What's the cubed? Is, well, do that for yourself. What are your interests? What are the variables as you see them? What is your BATNER? But do it for the other person as well. What are their interests? How do they see the different variables? What's their BATNER? And if you know that, then it's going to you're going to be in a much better position to present your message in a way that they will say yes.
Yeah.
But the cubed bit is that it's not even just you and them. There's other people. There will always be other people, their boss or their partner or the competitor or the regulator or whoever it is. There are always other stakeholders in this negotiation. And so identify those key stakeholders and do the same for them, their interest variables and BATNER, and then you'll have a really good understanding of the map of the negotiation.
Wow, that adds a whole another level to the whole idea of rapport, communication, and
Yeah.
even negotiation. I've never looked at it that way.
No, most people don't. But it's giving you a structure for understanding that negotiation, and it's giving you a structure for reaching win-win. And most people think win-win isn't possible, but it is if you go through this structure.
So that win-win element is very important, right? Because you said, like, if you got someone who's like, no, not budging,
Yeah.
you can't do much with that.
Well, if they're not budging, you can do things with that. It makes it a lot harder.
Hmm.
What you need to do is kind of explore, because what you want to do is, if they're not budging, it's because they're thinking on the positions, the I'm not going to sell it for less than £2,000. They're
Yeah,
bringing that old school approach. And
yeah,
it's your job to shift their thinking to the win-win approach, the collaborative approach. And how you do that is you ask them, let's say it's selling the car, and you'll say, they'll say they're not selling it for less than £2,000 or whatever. You say, okay,
hmm,
that's interesting. I mean, I don't actually have £2,000. Tell me, can you tell me a little bit why are you selling the car? And what's the reason behind that? And you explore all of that, and then it could be that you decide actually you've got a banger and you can pay £1,000 plus your banger, or you've got a bicycle and you can pay £1,800 plus your bicycle, or but basically you do that exploring, get them to be thinking, shift their thinking to what are the bigger picture reasons for them. Maybe it's they need £2,000 for the decorating of their house, or
yeah,
something. And you say,
yeah,
well, okay, look, I'm pretty good at decorating. I can do that. I'm kind of joking, but this is the thing. You find out the reason, and
yeah.
then you bring a creative answer, working with the variables, and you bring a creative answer to them to shift their thinking to this way. And that way they should start to budge.
Absolutely. So, one second. I knew this was going to happen.
Okay.
We're back. Okay. Talk about killing rapport.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh no, that's awesome. So that whole kind of like, you know, questions, and exploring
Yeah.
allows you to kind of dig deeper. And it's quite interesting to see like this whole idea of your side, their side, but then also other people that it influences,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, that's amazing. That's like such a deeper level on the kind of rapport side of it. And you can see how this can be utilized in pretty much a lot of situations, yeah?
So often, you're talking to one person and you're not getting the outcome that you want. And well, why not? Well, maybe because of somebody else in the background. Maybe their boss is saying no. Maybe this person you're talking to would love to give you the discount, but they can't because their boss is saying no. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Well, why is their boss saying no? And then you can start to broaden it out. And now, if you can address that, now you know that it's coming from the boss, and then, well, what is your boss's or their boss's concerns? Can you, and the interests, can you address those? And then if you can address those, now you're going to get your discount, kind of thing. So it's
Hmm.
working out. Maybe the problem isn't with the person you're talking to, it's somebody else, kind of thing.
Hmm.
For example, I don't know, maybe you're negotiating with your kids about doing their homework, or whatever, and they're refusing, or whatever, and then it turns out, how about if I think about their friend, because they're how about if I bring their friend over and they can do their homework together, or something like that.
Yeah.
Then we're bringing in another player, another stakeholder, to get the outcome.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And so that stuff you've spoken a lot more detail in your first book, isn't it? Is that
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That one was called Chain the Mind. Is that right?
So my first book was called The Leader's Guide to Negotiation,
Okay. Yep.
and Change Their Mind. That was what I did with that. As I interviewed people who negotiated successfully in extreme circumstances. So hostage negotiators, peace treaty negotiators, people who avoided war through their negotiations, billionaires, these kinds of people.
Right. 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 No, that's interesting. I mean, thank you for sharing that because I'm pretty sure people can start to get an idea of how they can, utilize that, and
Yeah,
they can definitely reach out and get hold of the books because I always say to people, get hold of it, learn, read, apply
I
it to
agree.
yourself. It's a very valuable thing to do.
Yeah.
And talking about war, then you got like your newest book. It's called
Yeah.
The End of Conflict, right?
Yeah.
How AI will end wars. Like, let's talk about that, man. Let's talk about this side of it is like, whoa, what's this about?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's pretty mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing for me. So so we go back a bit. So as I said at the beginning of my career, I was a techie. I was a coder. I was a programmer.
Mm,
Um, but I gave that up. But I was still had a little bit of geekiness in me, and I got involved in AI a very long time ago to a small amount, but back in the 1989, in fact, to a small amount. But by the time that 2005 came along, and there was a book came out called "The Singularity is Near" by Ray Kurzweil, and it's just
mm,
this mind-blowing book where he described everything that we're going through now in terms of AI and in terms of all of this change and everything. He
mm,
described this 20 years ago, and it's just really phenomenal book. And he described an awful lot more. You know, we're going to go through a lot more change, kind of thing. And I read it twice because I thought this is so mind blowing. I need to check it for plausibility. Is it credible? And I read it the second time, and it was very, very credible. And so ever since then, that was 2005. Basically, I've been fairly obsessed with AI as well. And
mm,
so I've given that my work is negotiation and my interest is AI, all along I kept checking in with negotiation and AI. And for a long time, like many AI topics, not really much going on. Then a small amount going on, but not that impressive. Then a little bit more. And then this time last year, I decided I was going to write a new book, and I thought the book should be on AI and negotiation. And if I'm to be honest, I thought it was going to be quite a dry book, quite a technical book, and a bit dull, to be honest. But when I did the research, as soon as I started the research, I just found stuff that was mind-blowing. And the title, as you say, The End of Conflict. And I just thought, well, this is actually very real. This is very, very possible. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but the book lays out a plausible roadmap to that, to the end of war, to the end of legal disputes, to the end of divorces, to the end of, we're talking about kind of falling out with your partner, whatever, to the end of that kind of stuff, and lots of stuff going on. So the end of war, to answer your question. So one of the first people I interviewed was somebody called Colin Irwin. He's a research fellow at Liverpool University. He was actually he does what he calls peace polling,
mm,
and he was involved in the Northern Ireland Good Friday Agreement. And what
yeah,
he would do is he would walk the streets with his clipboard, him and his team, and they would stop people doing their shopping and would say, "What do you want to see in the peace agreement?" And he would
yeah,
also check their demographics, whether they were Catholic, whether they were Protestant, this kind of stuff. And then he would feed all of that information back to the negotiators. And so the negotiators would be able to see, so we can see that the Catholics will accept this, but they would never accept this. The Protestants will accept this, but they'll never accept this. I think we can see where the agreement will be.
yeah,
And they did this with every single issue. They then go back onto the streets with the next issue and feed that back to the negotiators. So when it came to the final agreement and it was put to the referendum, they were very confident that it was going to pass, and it did. It passed with a huge, really large majority,
mm,
because they knew this is what the people wanted. So fast, and it turns out this is a very important part of peace agreements. So if we contrast that with the Oslo Accord between Israel and Palestine, which is round about the same time, in the negotiation rooms in the Oslo Accords, they struck a very good deal that all the negotiators were happy with. But it was done in secret because it was illegal on both sides. It was illegal for people of those countries to negotiate with the other side. So it was all done completely in secret, which meant when they presented it to the communities, both communities rejected it and said, no, 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 we don't want anything to do with this. And so that's why, tragically, it didn't work out. So fast forward, this chap, Colin Irwin, he still does the same. He still does peace polling around the world. He's done it in the Yemen, in Sudan, in all kinds of different countries. And he was telling me about an example in Libya that he was involved in.
mm,
Because the difference that he does in how he operates now compared to
Yeah.
before is before it was clipboards and pen and paper. Now it's AI supported.
Yeah.
And that means you can do a lot more people
Wow.
all at the same time and reach agreement. So with Libya, at the end of the civil war, you can imagine it was a bit chaotic. All of these different tribal gangs, all of whom hate each other, warlords in charge of each of them. Um, and they were trying to make some kind of sense of this, trying to form a government of national unity, etc. Nobody expected any success with this whatsoever. But
Hmm.
he used this AI platform called Remesh, and what this platform does, it enables people to put their opinions in what they would like to see in a government of national unity on the right to type it in into the platform. But whereas, for example, social media, if you did this on X or on Twitter kind of thing, it'd be instantly explode. And if it was me, I'd burst into tears and never go back to the internet ever again, kind of thing. But that's because social media is optimized for attention, which means optimized for outrage, optimized for anger, kind of things. These
Mm.
platforms are optimized for agreement. And so what you can have, so in fact, what they actually had, they did it live on TV. They did a 2 hour program where they did this live on TV. And a third of the country's population watched it. And they had 1,000 people all typing in what they wanted to see in the government of national unity. And then the AI working with them, it was not that the AI then came up with a solution. It's just that the AI platform supported the people coming up with a solution. But it was optimized for agreement. So it was kind of facilitated by, in fact, it was facilitated by the head of the United Nations program in Libya. So it had legitimacy. And so it was facilitated towards an agreement over 2 hours live on TV. And in the end, they were able to form a government of national unity that the whole country got behind, completely against expectations. So that was
Wow.
just when I heard that story, it absolutely blew me away. And then I carried on researching, and then just so many more similar kinds of things that is happening right now and
Yeah.
will happen a lot more in the future.
So it's safe to say that governments are already using these things, trying
So they
to.
are, you're right. So we talked about, so that example that I just gave in Libya, that's like in a fairly extreme example of a war zone trying to find peace. But even in your local council, they're starting to use the same platforms because let's say it's the local council is trying to find a policy about cycling lanes. And again, on a typical social media platform, if there was a debate about cycle lanes, and I would type in, I think there should be more cycle lanes in London, a million people would jump on me and call me all kinds of names. And if somebody then put, I think it should be less cycle lanes, it'll be exactly the same on them, and it would get nowhere. But these platforms are optimized for agreement. And what's
Wow.
really interesting is that people go through the process, and it could be that at the beginning yeah, no, I insist on more cycle lanes. I hate those people who don't like, I hate the drivers or whatever. And the other people are saying, no, 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 I insist on less cycle lanes. I hate the cyclists. But by the end of the process, they're all in agreement, and they found a solution that let's say, not necessarily everybody, but the large majority on both sides
Yeah.
will support. And more than that, and what's really interesting is that even the minority that vote against it, even those people who say, well, look, I disagree with this outcome. But what
Mm.
happens is that they say, but I will support it because I agree with this as a fair process. This
Right.
policy has been arrived at through a legitimate process. I was heard, I was listened to. I may disagree with the opinion, but I will still support it because I was listened to and I agree with the whole process.
Wow, that's the ultimate rapport.
It's nationwide rapport. It really is. In fact, it can be international rapport. It's rapport across a country. Right now, democracy is obviously going through really, really bad times, and the world seems to be more and more polarized over lots of different things. And talking across that divide seems to be very, very difficult. But these platforms enable to talk across those divides, and they bridge the divide and they heal the divide, and it brings the countries and the communities back together again. So it's super powerful kind of stuff. And you say governments are doing it at the moment, and they are, and they're only doing it in small amounts at the moment, because right now it's still kind of testing out the technology, and still the technology is evolving.
Yeah.
So they're doing it in small amounts, pilot studies here, case studies there, and that kind of thing. But the pilots are proving very successful. And
Mm.
I think this is going to be a process that is going to take off very, very soon. And I think democracy, the whole of our politics is going to change massively in the near future in a very positive way. And it's going to be driven bottom up from grassroots success. It's going to be driven by the successes at the grassroots level. So it's
Mm.
very, very, very positive.
That's, I mean, that's amazing. I've not come across that, optimized for agreement,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Now when you said it, my brain just went, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like you can
Yeah,
have, algorithms that do stuff like that. And,
yeah,
the AI is so like it's so possible with AI to do that and calculate these things a lot more
exactly.
quicker.
Yeah. And the AI can do that in different ways. It can do it because it can come up with an answer itself. Because, for example, maybe it can calculate data sets, big data sets. It can do lots complicated scenario modeling, economic modeling. It can come up with creative ideas, these kinds of things. But also, it doesn't even have to contribute to the answer. It can just manage all of the
Yeah,
humans' answers, if you like, and just to facilitate that
yeah,
in a calm, mediated way, because AI doesn't have emotions. AI doesn't have an ego. AI doesn't have an amygdala kind of thing. So its own emotions don't get in the way. And that's often
yes.
the problem with humans, our emotions. Even the best negotiators, often our emotions get in the way kind of thing.
No, no, definitely. I mean, that's just you just nailed it there, really, really. But have what are you seeing in terms of like because you talk about these biases being programmed into
Yeah.
algorithms and stuff like that. Like, have you come across much around that in this kind of space as well?
Yeah. Yeah. So you're right. The AI does have a lot of biases built into it. And that's problematic, without doubt. One of the interest, of course, why does it have biases? Well, it has biases for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's trained on the internet. The majority of
Mm,
AI, large language models anyway, are trained on the internet. And even if it's not trained on the internet, it's trained on human data. And so,
yes.
and so the bias comes from humans. Okay, so humans are biased, and the AI is just picking up on that. The
Mm,
other reason why AI is biased is because, well, firstly, most coders, uh, firstly, they're male. Secondly, they're young males. Most of them live of the big platforms. They live in Silicon Valley. The majority of them are white. So it
mhm,
is a fairly limited demographic set that is doing the coding, but
mm,
also doing the testing as well. And so when checking for biases, that young white male programmer does some quick checks and go, oh, seems all right to me, kind of
yeah,
thing, and doesn't notice what other people would notice.
yeah.
Um,
Because you
Now,
don't know what you don't know, right?
you
So,
don't know what you don't know, exactly. And that's very relevant. Uh, Now, it has. So then what's happened is that having built the large language models and things like this, and built various other AI platforms, and then they put them out in the world without testing them sufficiently, And to be fair to them, partly with thing with large language models is that they're universally applicable. So you can't test everything. On the other hand, I do think they should probably be doing a lot more testing than they have been doing. But anyway, they put them out in the world without doing sufficient testing, and they let the world do the testing, if you like. That shows up the biases and things like that, and then they try and correct for them. So there are movements taking place in terms of correcting for the biases, and this is both in different ways. That the large companies, OpenAI, Claude, Google, etc., they're doing these kinds of things. They've got debiasing software. They've got AI. They've got bias testing software. So you can run. I can't remember what's the name of the IBM one, but there's a few debiasing softwares out there that you can run some text on and say, is there any biases that I'm not aware of on this before you put it on live on the internet or something like that. So there's that kind of debiasing going on, but there's also, and this is what we would hope, some bottom-up debiasing kind of things. So indigenous people from different groups, different ethnic groups, different demographics, all doing their own kind of versions of AI and large language models, bringing in their own perspective that fit theirs, and then feeding that back, if you like, into the bigger pool. And so there's kind of top-down debiasing going on, and there's bottom-up debiasing going on. And what I think, and I think this again, this is very, very hopeful, is that humans are biased. I'm biased, you're biased, we're all biased. We can't help but be biased. We're wired to be biased. Debiasing society is difficult. It's not an easy thing to do. Debiasing AI is easier to do than debiasing society. Now, what I think will happen is that we will debias AI, and then society will become debiased from the debiased AI, if that makes sense. Because the AI will now be offering best practice, the debiased version of communication, of interaction, of relating to the world, etc. And so people who then work with that, or it's just embedded in our background, as AI will become more and more embedded in our background, it will be working from that debiased approach. And so society will become less and less biased. That's what I'm hoping for. And I think that is definitely a very plausible route forward, and it is moving in that direction now.
I'm in agreement with that one, because I do feel that it's funny. Like, if we get a bit like out there, crazy, right? You got, obviously you got the human, you got the human element, and now we've got the machine element, right?
Yeah.
And now if we're bringing those things together, we're utilizing those things. We're trying to utilize those things in a kind of symbiotic kind of way, right?
Yeah.
So we're taking the material and the tech, or almost like the spiritual and emotional element, bringing it with the tech, and we're making this new element to some degree.
Definitely.
And as a feedback, it can take us in many different ways,
Yeah.
And one of the ways which you just mentioned is that, like, if you could debias it, and then we're training the next gen from a state of a debiased approach,
Yeah.
it just filters out, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, absolutely. And so part of the premise of my book, the reason why I called it The End of Conflict, and I don't just mean the end of war, military conflict, but kind of the end of conflict in society. How can we be more collaborative, more harmonious in general, is exactly the same process, that AI can learn best practice from humans, and best practice conflict resolution does exist. We as a species do know how to resolve conflicts. You just have to look at South Africa, Northern Ireland, these kinds of Colombia, these kinds of situations. So we do know how to do that, but that knowledge isn't widely spread. And so the average person doesn't know the best practice. And this is why we get in fights with our neighbors and with our partners, and we have arguments with the kids and this kind of stuff. So AI models the best practice and then is going to make that best practice more widely available. Right now, you can go onto ChatGPT or you can go onto my website, theendofconflict.ai.
Mm,
There's a little web chat on the bottom right-hand corner. There's a little icon. Click on that and a window pops up. And you can ask it questions about negotiations. So if you
yeah.
want salary, if you are involved in a salary negotiation, tell it the situation and it will give you really good advice. Or you've got a negotiation with a noisy neighbor, tell it about the situation and it'll give you good advice, kind of thing. And it'll give you advice from best practice, from collaborative win-win kind of negotiations. You can do this on ChatGPT and all kinds of places. They give you good advice. And this is only going to get better. So, firstly, it gives us good advice. Secondly, the core infrastructure processes moving forward are going to be more and more using AI, and they're going to use best practice. So, as an example, let's say you're in a self-driving car, and the self-driving car sees a car parking space, but another self-driving car sees the same car parking space at the same time. If it was humans driving, there'd be a fight. Both would try and get that space. But the self-driving cars won't do that because it would be disastrous if they did that. So they'd be programmed to one of them to wink with its indicator to the other one to go ahead and take it because they've seen another one just round the corner. So all of our kind of core embedded processes are going to be operating in a collaborative kind of way. So with that as the backdrop, we're just going to, in the same way that AI learned from us the best practice, we're
Yeah.
going to learn back the best practice from the AI kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny that because like the biggest advantage I feel with it's like what you say is AI is the uh, good and bad way is the emotional element is not there, right? So
Yeah.
it's just gonna say it as it is,
Yes. Yes.
right? And that's in a way that's the reality of the situation. That's just how it is,
Yes.
you know? So
Yeah.
then it allows it to kind of say, well, what's the best solution, best possible pathway from this,
Yeah.
and then give that feedback as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because too often, if it's the human involved, if it's me, I'll just be so angry with the other person that I won't accept what is the best solution or whatever, or what is a real life reality check kind of solution. I'll just, no, I want blood kind of thing.
Mm.
But the AI will say, well, look, you're not going to get blood. Here's your best approach kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, it's funny because at the moment, like it's such a gray area, right? In the sense
Yeah.
that so many people are talking about, oh, it's going to take my job away. This can happen. There's
Yeah.
like a negative connotation to it, right?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, when you look at what you're talking about,
Yeah.
look how good it is for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so those people who are concerned about jobs and such like, they're right. They're right. And I'm concerned about jobs and I'm concerned on the knock-on consequences of that. And I'm concerned about tech companies getting too much power. And I'm concerned about rogue AI. All of these issues, they're perfectly legitimate fears. But we shouldn't look at it as a binary thing that either AI is bad or AI is good. It can be both. It can
Mm,
be a tool that can be used for very bad ends, for very bad outcomes. And we do need to be concerned about that and try and prevent that. But
mm,
then equally, as you say, it can be used for really good outcomes. And so my book does talk a lot about the good outcomes, but it also has several chapters on the bad things as well and what we need to do to avoid those. And so,
yeah,
and kind of having conversations like this where it is a nuanced conversation. It's not AI is good or AI is bad. It's, well, it's good in this way. Let's make sure we do this and let's use it this way. It's bad in this way. Let's avoid that. Let's prevent that kind of thing.
yeah. And that's just the bit that brings it all together in a way because like you said the machine is binary whereas the human is not, so the
Yeah.
human can go beyond just right or left or right or yes or no, it can go
Yeah.
beyond that. And
Yeah.
if we can get those two things working together, we've got such a powerful Hybrid.
I agree. I agree. And there is this whole idea of kind of human-centric AI, which I think is a building, growing thing that um, kind of all of our decisions about AI, about regulating it, or about using it, or what we're going to develop, all of them should be with the single aim in mind of improving the lot of all humans for the benefit of all humans. So not and unfortunately, right now, that isn't the case. Right now, that there is some of that going on, of course. In fact, there's quite a bit of that going on. But the primary driver right now is the tech companies wanting to win the race
Mm,
of who's going to build the biggest and best AI that will take over everything, kind of thing. And so they're
yeah.
all running as fast as they can in that direction, and that's a dangerous race. So we need to try and change that dynamic so that it should be, because that's not about humans, that's about the spreadsheets, and it's about them getting rich and them getting powerful. We need to change the conversation and change the dynamic so that it is more about the benefit of all humans.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And like, oh my Simon, this topic is like phenomenal, man. I could talk about it all day,
Yeah,
and I know we have this thing called time as well, right? So,
yeah.
um, the book's out, but people could definitely get it on Amazon, I believe. Is that right?
You can get it on Amazon. It's called The End of Conflict, the paperback and the Kindle version on Amazon. It's not ready yet at Waterstones or Foils. It should be soon, but you can definitely get it on Amazon. You can also get it on my website. You can get a PDF copy from my website, theendofconflict.ai. In fact, you can get a discount from my website if you're willing to negotiate. So if you go to the buy the book page, there's a little negotiation bit there that if
Oh,
you can
awesome.
negotiate, you can get a discount. So
Oh, that's so bad. Look, do you know what? Like, if you were to just, I think we spoke about this. This could be so wide, but if you were to kind of just summarize it, and I love what you're working on. I really do. I think it's such a important thing.
yeah,
Especially even after this conversation, you've opened my eyes to a few things that I hadn't considered.
yeah,
So I'm definitely gonna get the book as well, read that through because you put a lot of knowledge and time into that. So 100%, if you were to summarize it, what would you say to people? Go get the book. Why should they get it? What's like summarize it quickly. So, you know,
yeah. Okay. Go get the book. Because firstly, it can help your life because there is content in the book that will help you negotiate better.
mm,
And as we said, get good at negotiation, get good at life, because we're negotiating in every context, whether it's with our partners or at work or wherever. So there's a lot of content in the book about how to negotiate better and build a relationship at the same time. There's also a lot of content in the book about how to use platforms, different platforms to help you in your negotiation better. So how to get AI on your side so you can negotiate better, but also get the book because we want to spread the word because we do
absolutely.
at the moment there are these two roads ahead of us. One is the quite scary road of the tech companies doing it all and ruling it all, etc. And then the other route is actually this kind of really positive road ahead of us where it really does benefit humankind, all of humankind. And that's the one that we want to make happen. And we do that by spreading the word because not enough people know about this, and we've
Hmm.
got to spread the word. So that's why I want people to buy the book. That's why I'm giving them the discount on the website, actually. So,
100%. I reckon go for it. Go do it. And
yeah.
people, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best thing for them to do?
So my website is www.theendofconflict.ai. And send me an email at info@theendofconflict.ai.
Right. And on that note, Simon, you know what? I really, really appreciate your time. I think we've had such a good conversation. There's so much more that we can speak about. Maybe we do a part two,
Yeah,
and if you're up for that.
you're great.
So genuine thank you. I just hope people have enjoyed it as well. And, any last words before you go?
Well, thank you very much for having me on here, Jatinder. I really enjoyed chatting, and as I said, I really do want to get the word out there to raise hope for people and to make sure that we do bring about the right outcome. So, thank you for giving me that opportunity.
You're welcome, man. And on that note, guys, folks, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to reach out, like I said, reach out, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much.